All right, welcome back. Let's begin the first leg of our conversation. We're reviewing continually the trade dispute between the unionists and, of course, Dangote refinery Pengassan. And we're hearing from the papers as well this morning that the NLC is placing its own members on alert. Well, you and I know what that means. What are the implications of this? And how will that meeting, as it continues today, how will it decide, the fate especially of Nigerians who may be at the receiving end of the outcome of the meeting? And joining us for this conversation, we have Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, who is an economist and who'll be speaking to these issues on the side of the marketers. And we'll be having, a representative of the unionists joining us later on. Mr. Emmanuel, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning from Abuja.
So let's start with that meeting. I wonder what feelers you're getting about, the state of the meeting. Of course, pressmen were asked to leave such that further consultations would continue. We know that the meeting is continuing at 2 p.m. today. Beyond the feelers, what are your expectations on the outcome of the meeting and how it would determine the scheme of things henceforth between Dangote refinery and the unionists?
Bukola, first of all, I think it's important that the federal government realizes, Mr. President realizes that whatever happens with this impasse and situation will speak volumes to foreign investors and will signal the president's investor readiness as he's been touting in his foreign trips for 24 months now. Because investors are asking themselves, especially non-speculative foreign direct investors that bring in capital for more than 5 years, they're asking themselves, does it make sense for us to deploy capital to Nigeria and invest in real sector and not the money markets, not the FPIs and the hot money, and then we get held to ransom like this, considering that there are established laws and processes that must be followed. Bukola, it's important for us to always situate things within the context of the law, because the reason why countries have constitutions and there are laws that govern the way human beings behave or assemble themselves is so that you don't have a banana republic. If you check the Federal Republic of Nigeria Constitution, we check the Trade Union Act, especially the Trade Disputes Act that governs all trade unions in Nigeria, there's an established process for such disputes. And the question I keep asking is, look, the fuel attendants at over 30,000 retail filling stations across Nigeria, they earn between 25 and 30,000 naira per month. Are they not oil and gas workers? Why is Pengassan and Nupeng not fighting for their rights? The drivers that belong to Nupeng, that truck petrol from depots across Nigeria, are they not oil and gas workers? They earn about 67,000 naira a month. Why is Pengassan and Nupeng not fighting for their rights? The question is, are they not oil and gas workers? Because if Nupeng and Pengassan claim that they are actually fighting for the rights of workers, the question that we should ask them is, why are the fuel attendants and the truck drivers that take products from depots across in Apapa, Tinkan, across Nigeria, why are they earning 60? In fact, quite a number of them earn below minimum wage, which is illegal. NLC always talks about minimum wage and compliance with minimum wage. Why is NLC not fighting for their rights? Why is NLC not fighting for the rights of fuel attendants, more than 100,000 fuel attendants that work across Nigeria, earning 30,000 naira a month? Those fuel attendants depend on tips from customers who come to buy fuel at petrol stations. And I'm sure that you as a user, sometimes when you drive to a petrol station and you buy fuel into your tank, sometimes you tip the fuel attendants. So we should ask ourselves the question that if there is an established process that says, in the event of a dispute of such nature, they are supposed to write a letter to the Minister of Labour and Employment within 7 days of such dispute arising. If the Minister of Labour is not able to resolve it, like you currently have meetings going on that started yesterday that that held until about 11 p.m. last night, and ended at an impasse.
Right.
The minister is to set up a conciliatory committee and appoint a mediator or a conciliator. If the mediator or conciliator is not able to resolve it within another 14 days, the conciliator is supposed to refer the matter to an industrial arbitration panel, an IAP. This is in the Trade Disputes Act, by the way. This is not what I came up with. This is in the Trade Disputes Act. This is what is supposed to govern all trade unions in Nigeria.
Well, Mr.
If the industrial arbitration panel is not able to resolve it, they're supposed to refer the matter to the National Industrial Courts.
Right.
If National Industrial Court adjudicates over the issue, then and only then is the trade union allowed to issue a 7-day warning strike notice to go on strike. And Section 41 of the Trade Dispute Act says that in case where it involves areas that is classified as critical national areas or essential services, energy is essential services,
well,
and
Mr.
it constitutes critical national areas.
Right, let me come in here quickly.
Pengassin and Nupeng as a union are supposed to give a 14 days notice to the government that they are going on a strike.
All right, if you can hear me, Mr.
The question I have for you is,
unpack.
has this process been followed?
Right, well, that's not my question to answer, but let's just unpack some of the things you have said. And first, so it's not like we're deflecting. Yes, you've raised some valid issues with pump attendants. Can you hear me now, Mr. Emmanuel?
I can't hear you clearly.
Oh dear. So let me try again. I'm saying that while you've raised valid points, I do not want it to appear as though we're deflecting from the issues here. So this is primarily an issue between Dangote, right, and Pengassin Nupeng, right? So it's not between them and workers in the filling stations and all of that. While those problems are there, which of course we should pay attention to, this is primarily between these two parties. So I want us to stay in that context. That's on the one hand. Now you've talked about what is fair, what is right, what is just according to the laws. I want to ask you to, the firing of the 800 workers, would you describe that as fair, since we're looking at both sides and saying who is doing right, who is doing wrong? Would you describe that as also fair, following due process at this time?
Kayode, my audio is very low. I can't hear you clearly.
Oh, I see.
All right.
So we'll try to resolve that, Babukola.
Okay. Perhaps help Kayode out at this point. Can you hear me clearly, Mr. Emmanuel? Can you hear me clearly, Mr. Emmanuel?
Never mind. We'll resolve that just to ensure that we're able to have the back and forth with Mr. Emmanuel. But those are some of the issues being raised. Because at this point, you wonder, what is this about, really? Is this about power? Who gets to wield the most influence in that all-important sector? Believe it or not, that is a major issue here. Well, some have said it's about the people, the interest of the people, but ultimately it's always about influence. Who gets to wield most of the influence? But the other challenge now is what the president will do about this. But we'll try to reconnect with Mr. Emmanuel Babukola. These are some of the issues.
And, one of the most important points from Mr. Emmanuel and Mr. Adeni this morning is whatever the outcome of this meeting is would send a very reassuring signal, or a signal that, speaks of lack of confidence to investors about the ability of Nigeria to manage the concerns around its, oil and gas sector. Because Dangote refinery may be a major player, which is, rising to the occasion to provide energy security for Nigeria. But there are other players in the downstream sector as well. There are other players who are also refining petrol as well. There are other players who are also drilling crude. So what signal does this send, to investors about confidence in, the different parts of that sector? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, time and again, we have this challenge about Nigerian workers not having competitive skills. Well, we must be sure about whether this is the case in the sack of 800 workers. That is one of the reasons for the disaffection of Pengassan. But we must ask that very critical question, that do they have the requisite skills that prepare them, to play competitively in the oil sector, this time the downstream oil sector? Because if Dangote is saying that he's reorganizing his corporation to meet global best practices, hence the recruitment of Indian workers, we must ask, what do those Indian workers have, that surpasses what Nigerian skilled workers or a little less skilled workers have? Those are the issues. And, it also speaks to whether or not the regulators are forward thinking about global best practices, about how to position Nigeria as indeed a player that cannot be ignored in the downstream oil sector, in the very critical energy sector. I wonder if Mr. Emmanuel is, back now and can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Brilliant. So my colleague was asking earlier that it seems as if, both parties are guilty on this particular matter. On the one hand, you're saying that Pengassan has not met the requirements of the Trade Dispute Act before going ahead to declare a strike. But, Pengassan is also saying that it will not meet Dangote with the rule of law if Dangote also fails to, abide by labor laws seen in the sack of 800 workers.
Bukola, it's a very good question you asked. Now, look, you see, Dangote is a private organization. Dangote is not NNPC. Dangote is not the government. Dangote is located in a free trade zone. Dangote, as a company, has, first, a right to hire and fire as it fits the company, right? So if, for example, he's doing a reorganization and he says that, look, I'm looking at my balance sheet, I'm looking at my business, and I'm looking at the fact that for several months, there's been cases of internal sabotage in the company, and this doesn't make sense. And the management has decided that it's in the best interest of the company, given how sensitive a commercial refinery is, to reorganize the company at this material point in time. The management has the right to do so. If Pengassan and Nupeng feels aggrieved, NLC and TUC feels aggrieved by it, based on the Trade Unions Act, there is a process to follow. You don't sabotage the economy. The earlier guest was talking about the impact of the gas valves being the gas feedstock supply being turned off. ELPS1 that goes to West African Gas Pipeline Company from Escravos. ELPS2 that supplies gas feedstock to Dangote Refinery for power generation is generating about 500 megawatts of power currently, and he's at about 70% utilization for installed capacity for 3 million metric tons of urea. If you turn off the gas and there's no gas going to the export markets through pipes, and there's no gas going to gas-based industries, there's no gas going to the generating companies for power, you affect the economy. And Pengassan is in trying to fight for, according to them, workers' rights, crippling the economy that it's fighting for. If you don't obey the process, then you live in a banana republic. The reason why there are laws that govern how these things should be addressed and done is so that you don't come to a situation where one party that seemingly feels aggrieved, cripples the entire economy. It doesn't make any sense. It's also a wrong message and signal to foreign investors, especially the non-portfolio investors, who the president is courting to come to Nigeria to invest. They're asking them, and this is especially because, Bukola, if you go back in time, the same Pengassan and Nupeng, they've been at the heart of, ensuring that these government-owned refineries that NNPC wasted $18 billion to fix, and nothing came out of it. They're under lock and key. Were not sold to private investors. Just imagine for a second, Bukola, that in 2007, the government-owned refineries were sold to CNPC and Blue Star Consortium. And that within 4 to 5 years, in 2012, those refineries were taken by the private sector. They were revamped. And Nigerian government stopped paying subsidy. Within that intervening period, between 2007 and 2012, the Nigerian government lost more than $13 billion to under-recoveries for subsidy payments that were fraudulent. The Nigerian government lost another $18 billion to turnaround maintenance between 2007 to 2025. The same unions went to late President Yar'Adua and told him that he should not, and they opposed strongly that if the president attempts to sell those refineries, they will go on strike and shut down the economy like they currently did. Nigeria has lost more than $30 billion within the intervening period to subsidy fraud and turnaround maintenance. Dangote was bold enough to invest in a commercial refinery. This attempt by Pengassin and Nupeng is not fighting for workers' rights, because like I told Kayode earlier, if they were really fighting for workers' rights, they will also fight for the right of petrol station attendants, who you and me patronize when we drive into petrol stations to buy fuel, who earn 30,000 naira a month, below minimum wage. If they are fighting for workers' rights, they will fight for the right of the same truck drivers who take petrol from depots in Lagos across Nigeria, who are earning below minimum wage. Dangote is actually paying 3 to 4 times what those petrol tanker drivers are paying to the tanker drivers who are distributing petrol directly from the refinery to filling stations around Nigeria. So the talk about he's not treating his workers well is blackmail, and it's fishy. Well, they don't have evidence to show that he's not treating his workers well.
Mr. Emmanuel,
in the refinery runs 24 hours. You don't shut down the refinery.
He who wears a shoe, if you can hear me, Mr. Emmanuel, he who wears a shoe knows where it pinches the most. These are workers that are in the sector, they work there. It's one thing for them to say something if you have evidence against that. Maybe if you're in the sector as well, if you work, that you give us evidence. But this is their own experience they're voicing out. And I want us to also speak to this. Earlier on, I was saying that, well, yes, you've raised issues about the petrol attendants, but, you know, this issue is primarily between Pengassin Nupeng and Dangote, so it's not seen as though we're deflecting from the main issues. But I want you to speak to this, Mr. Emmanuel. This is a very important sector, not just to Nigeria, globally. Whoever has the most influence in that sector is simply the most powerful person. It's as simple as that, which is why we've seen successive presidents be the minister of petroleum, just to show how important this is. Do you think it is right for one man, woman, one entity or whatever to wield the most influence in that all-important sector? And I want us to be unbiased as much as we can. Do you think it means well for that sector, for our nation, if one person or one entity, be it one union, wields more influence than the other, rather than have balancing of those powers?
Are you speaking to the unions or are you speaking to Dangote?
I am speaking to the sector. Do you think it is fair for one, that's why I say one man, one woman, one entity, one union, anybody to wield more influence than another person rather than have a balance?
Kayode, I've just told you that between 2007 and now, Nigeria lost $30 billion.
No, let me reiterate my question, Mr. Emmanuel. I understand you've made those points, but I'm saying, seeing how important that sector is, do you think it is fair for one party to wield the most influence in that all-important sector?
Deflecting. You see, commercial refineries are so capital intensive. It costs $20 billion to build the Dangote refinery.
Forgive me, Mr. Emmanuel. I'm not sure you got my question. If you can hear me, Mr. Emmanuel, I'm not sure. Did you get my question? Oh, okay. Okay, please go ahead. Please go ahead. I wasn't sure you got it.
Asking me if I think it's okay for one entity. Asking me if I think it's okay for one entity to wield so much influence.
Yes, please.
There are more than 31 licenses that were given to different companies by NMDPRA under what they call license to establish. There are 3 different categories of licenses given by the regulator, mid and downstream. License to establish, approval to construct, and license to operate. When you satisfy all the requirements of LTE, they give you what they call approval to construct for your EPC to proceed. When you finish construction and they come for the pre-commissioning process, they give you what they call license to operate. There are more than 31 active licenses that were given, Kayode. The question you should ask is, why have these companies not invested in building refineries before Dangote came up and took it up? That's the question we should ask. So, is Dangote preventing anybody from investing in commercial refineries in Nigeria? Absolutely not. He decided to take it on. Nobody has had the courage to put themselves on the line. Considering all the issues that he has, it started last year. You and I are witnesses to the issues he has had since the refinery started operating last year. If he's not getting crude oil feedstock, the regulator is falsely claiming that his sulfur level for his diesel is higher than regulatory standards, which is false. Or the marketers are fighting him. Or all kinds of issues you've had since last year. Considering all that has happened, do you think that the other people who currently own refinery licenses for LT will be motivated or incentivized to want to put their money down to invest in Nigeria? So the question of, do I think if a single entity controls the sector is good for the economy, it doesn't apply, because the alternative to it are substandard products that have been imported to Nigeria for which the regulator does not have a lab to test. And the oil and gas sector in mid and downstream is so highly regulated. If you check sections 29 to sections 52 of the PIA, you'll see all the laws that governs the mid and downstream sector. And you also see regulatory gazettes that NMDPRA has produced based on sections 29 to 52 of the PIA, even to the extent of governing the pricing framework and guidance for pricing petroleum products, which is very transparent. And I've always told Nigerians that if you want to understand how petrol prices are priced, you simply multiply the price of a metric ton of petrol, which has 1,341 liters in it, by the exchange rate, and divide by the number of liters in that metric ton. You get the price. That's how you arrive at the price. There's no issue of Dangote is too powerful. He's the one that has had to invest. Stake his shares in Dangote Cement as a collateral to raise money. Afro-Exim was the first that gave him a loan to invest in the refinery. Then you had a consortium of Nigerian banks who gave him a loan to invest in the refinery. When they gave him that loan, when the consortium of Nigerian banks gave him that loan, interest rate was around 14 to 16%. Because of the FX revaluation and the increase of MPR rates, interest rates went above 30%, which means that he's had to pay double on interest for the loans he collected from Nigerian banks to build that refinery. And he's drawn down his loans to $3.8 billion. So if you have 31 active licenses that were given to different companies, some Nigerian companies, some international companies, to build refineries in Nigeria, and they didn't have the courage to invest, and he did, why is he being blamed and punished for investing in Nigeria? Is that what the president has been going around asking investors to come and do in Nigeria?
And those are
so
questions.
The question of if he's too powerful or if he's an entity too powerful doesn't hold water. It doesn't make any sense. If other people are threatened by him, they should put capital together and go and invest in the refinery to compete with him.
Just to be clear, Mr. Emmanuel, this is easily the most objective question. And it's not about Dangote. It's not about the unions. It's about the industry. Should one entity, and that's why I said entity, man, woman, union, whatever, wield the most influence? So it's not targeted at one person. Should the unions wield more influence? That's what this question is about. But Bukola has the next one. Bukola.
Yeah, and we know we've asked that question time and again, but we cannot ignore Mr. Kelvin's position also about, why other potential investors have not risen to the occasion. And your concern about the role of the unionists in the Port Harcourt refinery, we did ask that question through to Mr. Brown yesterday, and, we didn't get a clear-cut answer, evidently for, reasons, relating to the very deeply invested sentiment towards the side of the unions in this ongoing conflict. But, where we are now is that both sides have thrown caution to the wind. And Dangote Refinery itself has said it will start selling petrol in dollars. I want you to speak to that. We know that there is, an arrangement with the federal government where crude is being sold in Naira. We don't know if that, also affects petrol as well. Whatever the policy is, can Dangote Refinery jettison the policy agreement with the federal government and start selling petrol in Naira to marketers? And how will that impact on Nigerians in terms of the pump price of petrol?
Well, it's a very excellent question you asked. Look, let me run through the daily crude allocation so our audience can understand. Nigeria, for example, when you hear Nigeria pumps 1.5 million barrels of crude per day, all of that crude doesn't belong to the government. I'll say about 700,000 belongs to the JV partners, PSC partners, who are the operators that have partnerships with NNPC, that is the concessionaire for the oil and gas assets upstream the government owns. About 800,000 barrels, about thereabout, belongs to the government, the NNPC, NUPRC, and FIRS, tax oil, royalty oil, and then, profit oil, collects. Okay? Now, let me break down the daily crude allocation. 300,000 barrels goes to what the government calls subsidy savings. Whatever that means, I don't know. It's a good question for another day. Another 300,000 barrels goes to wholesale agreements, which are loans that the government has collected historically from 2019 to date. In my, analysis, about $14 billion of those transactions have been structured. Last year they did Project Gazelle 1, 30.4. Early this year they did $2 billion, and maybe sometime before the end of this year you might see another wholesale agreement. 78,000 barrels goes to pipeline security contracts, which is the equivalent of about $5 million on a daily basis. Only less than 200,000 barrels actually goes to FIRS for tax oil, and then NUPRC for royalty oil, which is calculated as volume, depth, and price for onshore and offshore acreages. So I'll say the government gets less than $300 million per month from the oil and gas sector to the Federation account. All right? Now, Dangote is not getting up to 40,000 barrels under that so-called Naira-based crude incentive. He's not getting up to 40,000 barrels. So the talk of the government supplying him crude oil in Naira, then he should price in Naira, is completely not true. I'll tell you that about 97 to 98% of the crude oil Dangote processes daily at the refinery in Lagos are paid for in dollars. As a matter of fact, most of the crude oil blends, Nigeria has 34 blends of crude oil. 34 blends. Most of the crude oil blends that are sold to him by operators and NNPC in Nigeria are actually routed through third-party trading partners, which is not provided for in the PIA. There's nowhere in the PIA where it says that operators are allowed to circumvent sections 109 of the PIA and sell crude to a domestic refiner through a third-party partner. They are sold at a premium of anywhere between $3 and $6 per barrel. So imagine you paying an extra $3.5 million to $6 million per 1 million barrels of crude oil you buy from Nigeria, which is $6 million more expensive than him importing crude from America.
So pardon me, Mr. Emmanuel.
This Naira-based crude incentive is just...
Pardon me, Mr. Emmanuel. Why is...
paper that doesn't apply in reality.
Why is the federal government going against the PIA by selling crude to Dangote through third party? Before you, land on the final part of the question.
Bukola, that's a good question for the minister, the coordinating minister of the economy, Wale Edun, the minister of petroleum, who happens to be the president, and the minister of state for petroleum, and the head of NUPRC, Benga Kumula. That's a very good question for them to answer. Why are they seeing the crude that are sold to him in dollars through third-party partners, and him having to pay a premium, and then you asking him to give discounts on petrol, considering that petrol prices are twice the price in other West African countries and in other countries in Africa than it is in Nigeria? I was in Nairobi 2 months ago, and the price of petrol in Nairobi is $1 per liter. I'm not saying the price of petrol should be $1 per liter in Nigeria, but considering that we're getting it at half the cost and Dangote is buying crude oil in dollars, this question should be directed at the government.
All right, so Mr. Emmanuel, let's try to break it down so we have takeaways from this, because I want to imagine that is the goal even for the parties that are loggerheads. So one, can the workers unionize in Dangote? Do you think that's a fair thing for them to want to aspire to?
Dangote is not against workers unionizing. And yes, the workers can unionize.
All right.
Right? Because it's provided in ILO conventions, it's provided in the Trade Union Act. He's not against them unionizing. His position has always been that Pengasing and Nupeng cannot compel his workers against their wish to unionize. You can't say that automatically because you're in the oil and gas sector, every worker in Dangote refinery must unionize.
But they are free, the ones that want to unionize are free to unionize, and there should be no punitive action taken against them, right? The reorganization of some staffs in the refinery, against what has been trending and against the narrative that Pengasing and Nupeng is trying to push, was not because they unionized. The reorganization of the refinery was because of internal sabotage. It was not because of unionization. Sections 43
1B of the Trade Union Act says that a trade union cannot compel non-members to join his union against their wish.
It sounds like you're saying the same thing, Mr. Emmanuel. Internal sabotage, unionizing. What's the difference? Or what does internal sabotage mean in this case? Maybe let's be clear on that.
Right. Kayode, if an employer of labor says that we have reason to believe that some staffs are not following standard operating procedure and it's affecting the company, and there's a reason to reorganize and let go and reshuffle and bring in new people, management has come to a conclusion and it has a right to do so. If there's, aggrieved party, there's a process to follow, rather than go and shut down the whole country. And I'll give you a perfect example of why this is so. A few months ago, when Bayo Ojulari came as the new GC of NNPC, Bayo Ojulari and his team set out to, retrench and ease out 720 people from about 5,000 people that NNPC currently employs. He went off with the first batch. When he went off with the first batch of nearly 200 people, Pengassin and Nupeng came and said to him that if he goes ahead with his plan to reorganize NNPC so that he can meet up with the KPIs the president has set for him in the first 6 months of his probation, that they were going to shut down the entire NNPC. Pengassin and Nupeng actually threatened GC of NNPC to shut down NNPC if he goes ahead with his plan of reorganization. I'm giving you an example of what Dangote is doing that is in the interest of his business and his shareholders, considering that he borrowed money to build a refinery that NNPC has failed to do for years. So if he says that he's reorganizing because management believes that there is a reason to reorganize, it's not because they joined the union. It's not because they joined the union. The narrative they are trying to push is blackmail. And they have violated the law because, like I said earlier, there's an established process to follow if there's a grievance by aggrieved parties.
So the question
and they've not followed that process.
Mr. Emmanuel, the question is why, if you say this is blackmail, why would Pengassin want to blackmail Dangote refinery?
That's a very good question, Bukola. Now, go back to the amount that Pengassin and Nupeng charges per truck that drives out of depots in Nigeria. And the question I have for NMDPRA, because they are the regulator, Farouk Ahmed has been absent. I don't know if he doesn't know his job. The question I have for him is, what law of the PIA gives Pengassin the right to charge a fixed sum per truck loaded out of depots in Nigeria? Number two, the union dues they collect. The union dues they collect, they deduct from the salary of workers who are members of their union. Across Nigeria, the thousands of workers who are members of their union. So when you look at the financial incentive of them compelling people to join their union, you begin to understand the motivation behind their action. When you look at also the fact that Pengassin and Nupeng has been acting as a proxy of the marketers who realize that Dangote's forward integration to set up trucking services around Nigeria to take petrol down to the last mile to retail stations is the end of their depot business, which has been for arbitrage purposes. You see their motivation and incentives.
Well, I must say that it's almost as though both sides are accusing each other of something the other side is also doing at this point. And we can go on, and it looks like this is going to be one that will define the industry. What are your expectations regarding outcomes? What do you think will be a meeting point for these two parties? Because if we keep going this way, if both parties stay, we're sticking to our guns, we're not shifting ground, then this will end up in a big disaster. Some have described it as a possible doomsday. So the options on the table are, first, reintegrate the 800 workers that you retrenched. There should be no punitive actions. If they want to unionize, by the way, we've not heard any of them saying, we don't want to unionize, we're being forced to unionize. At least that has not come through, right? Secondly, maybe there should be some sort of deal that, hey, whatever is going to happen, do not affect our production because we have loans to pay back. This is not our money, okay? And we're also trying to ensure that Nigerians get a semblance of a sane industry when it comes to the petroleum industry. So what is a middle ground for you? Because all of these options are on the table and it looks like both sides are not moving an inch.
Kayode, it's for me, I think it's important to understand that whatever happens with this will set the precedence for international investors. It's very important. It's a signal to international investors. I think it's unhealthy for a trade union to hold Nigeria to ransom. And Mr. President needs to intervene, right? The extreme option would be for the government to proscribe the unions, which I don't think is the solution here. All right? I also don't think it's right for Pengasyn to blackmail and say to the government that if Dangote does not reinstate the workers that management has deemed fit to reorganize and retrench, that they are not going to resume their services to the other areas of the economy. I think it's blackmail. So it's important for the government to realize that whatever decisions are arrived at, it sets the tone to foreign investors. And it's not a very good tone if the government feels that Pengasyn should have their way. I don't think that it's in the interest of the Nigerian economy for a union to hold the economy to ransom. I believe that due process should be followed. There is a Trade Dispute Act that should be followed. I also believe that the industry is transiting to a new era, okay?
No, Mr. Emmanuel, so are you trying to say, pardon me, are you trying to say that only the unions have some sort of compromise to make and Dangote is right in its position, doesn't have to shift grounds? Is that what you're saying?
Kayode, look, when you talk about Dangote doesn't have a right to shift ground, I'm at a loss because
no, you've not mentioned what Dangote should do in this case. It's mainly the unions. They can't hold the ransom. They can't do this. They can't do that. So basically, you're saying that Dangote shouldn't shift ground in this. Only Pengasyn.
A court gave an injunction, yes, pending the hearing of the substantive suits, barring Nupeng and Pengasyn from shutting down supply of crude oil and gas to Dangote refinery. Look, it's unconstitutional and it's illegal for Pengasyn to order for crude oil supply that are based on commercial contracts that has been signed between Dangote, Nigerian Gas, NGML, NGIC, and about 6 operators. It's unconstitutional. You giving them credence and saying that they are right in their action sets a negative precedence for other international investors.
Well, they say they have not gotten...
And we need to be clear about that.
They say they have not gotten the court order. But I'm saying they're on the table at this point, Mr. Emmanuel, and they have to shift ground. And that's what all of this conciliation is all about. Both parties have to shift ground. Now, the measure is another case entirely. And we must say that we're meant to be joined by a representative of Pengasyn on the show, but the connection will not allow just to have a robust conversation, Mr. Emmanuel. Bukola.
And just to add to what you had said earlier, Mr. Emmanuel, that Nupeng had denied that it introduced 50,000 naira per truck to the distribution of petroleum products in its ongoing negotiation with Dangote.
Bukola, let them open their books to an external audit. If they are denied, let them open their union books to an external audit. Let them open their books to an external audit.
So, in addition to that, and as we round off now, Pengasyn is in negotiations with Dangote right now, brokered by the federal government. But there were other issues to this. The initial disagreement was between Nupeng and Dangote, and then there was also Dapman and Dangote. When this is resolved, how sure are we that we're not going to go into another round of trade dispute between Dangote and these other players in the industry? Or do you have any feelers that they are also part of the ongoing negotiations? Because we don't have any insight as to whether those other matters have been resolved between Dangote and the other parties.
Bukola, there's nothing to resolve between Dangote and Dapman. Nigeria is moving from importing of products to commercial refining, which is backward integration for products, and Dangote has the capacity to solve Nigeria's wide transportation fuel needs. There's nothing to resolve. The depots that are located in Apapa and Tinkan are in the past, right? They should form a consortium, build their own refinery and compete. If they don't want to form a consortium, they should pay the 75 naira per litre charge for loading and freights and pumping of products to their tank farms, because Dangote is not going to give them a 75 naira per litre discount, which will cost him 1.5 trillion naira in subsidies to them. There's nothing to resolve. The market is moving. He's invested $250 million in CNG trucks to take petrol and diesel to the last mile. Okay? And Bukola, let me say this. Let me say this. The airline operators of Nigeria is a witness. Because if you look at the value attribution, 40% of the cost in aviation goes to Jet A1 and automotive turbine kerosene, ATK. Okay? The BAUSAs run by the cartel that controls the Jet A1 supply industry in Nigeria. Dangote has offered to sell Jet A1 at 980 naira per litre. Jet A1 is being sold at 1,240 naira per litre to airlines in Nigeria. The cartel said that Dangote wants to take their business. So the question I should ask Nigerians is, does it make sense that Dangote is exporting his Jet A1 to Europe and to the US and to Southeast Asia, and the cartel that controls the Jet A1 supply business in Nigeria are selling at a 35% inflation, and Nigerians are made to pay 250 or 300,000 naira for airline tickets in Nigeria? Does it make sense?
Those are very difficult.
Does it make sense?
Very difficult.
I'll give you another one before I leave, Bukola. I'll give you another one before I leave. I'll give you another one before I leave. Bukola, I'll give you another one before I leave.
If you can do it in 10 seconds. 10 seconds.
LPG is sold for over 1,000 naira per kg by the cartel that controls the LPG Association in Nigeria. Dangote has offered to sell LPG to Nigerians at 800 naira per kg. Does it make sense that the distribution to the last mile have said they don't want his LPG because he wants to offer directly to consumers at 800 naira per kg, and they are selling at over 1,000 naira per kg?
Very concerning.
Whose interest are they fighting for?
Very concerning disclosures that you have made there, and they're worth following up on. You know, perhaps when we have these conversations with these associations in the near future. We must thank you very much, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel, for your time and your contributions on the program. Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel is an economist who has spoken for Dangote on this particular one. Maybe I should just reiterate that we also extended an invitation to a representative of the unions, but communication would not allow us, have a robust conversation. Thank you again, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel. We will transit from this conversation now to yet another that is just as important. We're looking at legal matters, and Mr. Barrister G.T. Ogunye joins us on the next one. Stay with us, we'll be right back.